Something unexpected happened at this Tony Robbins event that went on, and it didn't hit me like the very first one that I did. And for a moment, I just assumed it didn't work, and because years ago, I really needed that intensity. I needed that disruption. I needed my whole identity shaken, like wake up, Nene, kind of like thing. And this time it was quieter. It was grounded, almost familiar. There was a lot of remembering. I'm like, yes, growth. And what landed for me was that the event didn't change. I did. So in this video, I want to talk about what personal growth, like why it lands differently when you evolve, and why not needing like a breakthrough doesn't mean that like anymore, like you don't need that breakthrough anymore. Doesn't mean you're stuck. It just means that you are integrated, you know? So for me, it was more a case of having this realization that it doesn't have to always feel intense. It doesn't always have to feel like, whoa, like, okay, there's this big realization. Because when I was in my 20s, when I was in that situation of not having that beliefs really ingrained in my old story and all those things, I needed that. I needed that big shift. I needed that big, intense. And as we evolve, as we start doing the work, as we start conditioning ourselves, and for me, you think, oh, okay, you just assume like, okay, then something is wrong because I'm not as activated, or I'm not as into like whatever in it. When you look at it, it's more every layer that we go through, like every step we go, like we go in with one, like with my very first one, it was just kind of like, wow, the awareness. I start doing the work. I left. Doesn't mean that now I became confident. Then it was like I started doing what was required. And sometimes it was more like this, an up and down going upwards of the integration of the awareness, um, having that training, because that early stage was that pattern breaking, those belief shifting, those things where what for me, even borrowing beliefs at a time, because sometimes at that time I wasn't even sure. It was more kind of like, oh, really? Wow. The nervous system was really shooken, like had a big change in that sense. And with now, I find with this at this level of integration, it's more reinforcement. Like you hear something and you hear it again, you hear it slightly different. For me anyway. It feels like, oh yes, okay, we're doing right. It feels like the stability in what's happening and how I'm showing up and how things are going. And then it's not this massive big rewiring. It's a subtle rewiring. It's sort of like, okay, we might have been doing this. Well, okay, we get to do this again. We get to refocus. Like, yes, this was how for me, this was not like the awareness of like, oh yeah, it's working. Like this how kind of like it flows for me. Um, Intensity, right, would it's a waking up. It's like being aware, like this is what the deal is, while having that safety for help to just stay. Having that like, okay, this is how things are. Because my very first UPW, I needed permission for that one. I needed like, oh, yes, you're okay. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You don't have any issues. Like the awareness is there. It was more kind of like, yeah, babe, you got this. That very first one. And with that event, this new one that went, like, I already knew work. I was already doing the work. It was more kind of like, yes. And I think for me as well, I was coming from of like a place of this is what I already like, I'm already doing this for others. So it's more kind of like, yeah, oh, I see how you like how you do it, and then this is how I do it, and then this is like, okay, I get to be able to like jig it up for my folks or stuff like that. So I wasn't necessarily looking for answers in this latest, like the last event I went to. It was more alignment that I'm on the path. Like this is someone that has almost in his fifth decade of doing this, and it's like, okay, just checking in that I'm on par or I'm doing the work in my own way. It's like that's kind of like, whereas back then, the very first one, it was more kind of like somewhat like permission healing, all those things going. And as we grow in the personal development, as we're going through all this activation that gives us that regulation that we tend to use. So it's more, we go from, oh, does this work? We need to prove it works. We can see it works. To now, it's we're embodying this thing. I feel embodied by the work. I feel like it's kind of like part of who I am. From then it's like the hype of the event and all those things, those very first one of like, oh yes, this, to now it's more the habit of it, that I'm doing the thing that is required to get everything in me, right? Um, yeah, and it's like, when you like in the beginning, you are in that container, you leave it, and then you have this fear of like, okay, what about if nothing happens? What about if I go back into my old being? What about if I don't know what's landing? And so that's there, the fear of, oh, okay, I've done this now. The high and up or low, okay, how. And then depending on how activated you are, you can just go back to that, what we know, how things are, how, whatever. And that fear of, oh gosh, who am I? Did it even work? Do I need this fixing? Like what's that? So we have this like massive big shift that we need to work on. And it was more, I see it as with every exposure, it just felt like this. I just have to do this move. Like I was like this, and then like the expansion, and now let's go. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's what it felt like. It honestly, when you really look at who I was then and how I was hanging on every word, even though by the end of it, I think I just needed a certain bit of it. By the time I went into the next time they had another event, because I think I've done a couple. It was more kind of, oh yeah, and then yeah, to have that reinforcement, and that's why I kind of like a lot of people tend to want to attend such events just to be in that space, to be in that energy, to be in that magnetism, and that's why I love live events. I love that, and what it was then, and I think it's having that awareness of the thing that got you in first is not what's going to sustain you, because we're changing our focus, and the things that the desires are a whole different thing. I first went in from wanting to work on self and start trusting and start loving on self and like being okay to now being like, okay, oh, we get to show and showcase this for others and support and that to then have that integration going, to then have, I'm actually doing this work. And I see it this way as in the beginning, when I wanted to do something, the amount of time I was like stay in the fear of like the worry of thinking or whatever that is, to now, it's like I'm not in there longer. I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm out. Whereas before it was a dance. It was like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And it's a whole different thing now. I think age has a part to play in this. Of the mature you are, you don't give to S's, you know what I mean? That phrase. And that kind of like helps. But at the same time, you find that probably that people pleaser thing goes in anyway. For me anyway, this is like what I'm saying. Because even though I was doing the work and I was in it, it only really landed for me, I would say 5 years ago or six, that I was like, oh, okay, this is me. And I think one of the questions that I would love for us to kind of like reflect on or to think about, like what we needed, say 5 years, 10 years ago, and all those things, is not something that we need right now because of where we are and how far we've come. So letting that go is so powerful because we always like when you're doing something, we always think that this is it. We're always going to be in this, and we're forgetting that every step we make, for me anyway, I forgot every step we make, there's actually progression, there's growth. Because me now and me then are totally different people. It's like when you up level to a next thing, you might be using the same sets of things, but you're looking at it through a different lens. I'm totally looking at it from a whole different perspective. Back then, I didn't even think I'll be living or being how I am now. So what the thinking and the feeling is so different from where it is now. And I find that sometimes when I've gone into something, I'll be like, oh yeah, okay, this time it landed. I might even know what's coming up next. I know how like the cues and what's being said. But something just like, oh, for me. So there's this evolving. And I think like we all know, we overestimate like, oh, this event, this is it, this one time, I'm like, yeah. And then we realize that no, we need to like we need a couple of those events to hit the mark, to get the thing going, to have whatever it is that we're wanting to like come to life for us. And growth doesn't always have to be this great raw, like a big thing all the time. Sometimes it's just like I go in there and I listen. Like with this last one, it was just kind of like, oh yeah, hmm, okay. I felt like yes, seen in what it is that I'm doing, and like, okay, yeah, we get to course correct. This is where we get to move on from. Coming from um having done that first one of having no idea of what is involved, what to expect, all the breakthroughs that I had, those massive big shifts, those intensity. And now, having now done other work to up-level myself, to get more in depth and intense training, and going from that lens and what, like, just seeing it. I think I was coming from, how would I do this to myself? How would I create this experience for someone else? What can I learn or see that I can then use for me? Not necessarily following the format or whatever, but it's just kind of like that. Um, yeah, that's kind of like how the approach. Whereas then I needed the work. I needed a healing. I needed a stuff worked on me. And the key thing is, for me, and that's why every time I go to an event, I don't just go for like, okay, oh, it's the next event, like let's go. I always figure out, the last time I was here, how am I now? What do I want to gain from this? And the next time, if I'm coming to this event again, where do I want to be? What's the thinking? What's the I always have, I like to have like measurable things for the next event, especially if it's one that I know that it's like a yearly thing, or if it's so often, is giving myself those markers so that it's not kind of like, oh, we're here again. Oh, let's go. And then it's like, oh, because for the longest time, that's what I kept doing, is just attending the events, and I was feeling all this greatness and all these things. And I had to like just shift things up a bit to be like, okay, I'm here now. Because I regularly go to an annual conference for my neuro encoding specialist community that I'm in. And every time I go, I always like, okay, yeah, this year now, like I reflect towards like the end while I'm in there, what I'm learning, what am I shifting, and how, when this event rolls around again, where do I want to be? What do I want to be? Like all those, like having those markers. And I think for me, that's how I've been able to help this evolving of how things are like in terms of like events I go to and things that are shifting for me. And there are some events I'm like, have I grown? Like what they were offering and how it was then wasn't a thing. And I think for me, even with just this, say with like Tony's event, I went for a while. I even did his mastering, and then for like a 15-year span, there was no Tony in my life. I guess because we were having we're popping up babies, and we're doing other life, and I was going into more interest, more into kind of like wanting to do training of being a coach, like doing like I did law of attraction, other kind of like stuff that I was more into. So even yes, there was a span where that wasn't it, while I was doing other things just to like grow myself. And then coming back and then seeing this and just remembering everything and how things were, was such great aha of like, whoa, okay, this this felt different in a different way. It wasn't kind of like, whoa, okay, this is the thing I want, or like blah blah blah. It was yeah, it landed differently, that I thought, "Ooh, but I gained so much." Yeah, in this way. And I was very, very intentional, and in how it flowed, in how things are, that when we do events, we can't expect to have the same feeling, or be, or to, like, what you come in for from one level, when you come back, you're on a whole different level because you have done the work, right? And then you've come back now, and it's like, okay, let's integrate some more, and then okay, let's do more work, and that's how we go in. Because for me, being in rooms and being in spaces like that not only helps with the magnetism, it also helps with expansion, also helps with the possibility of like the competency, and you can then see, it's like anything with our careers. Like when you look at it from when you started out to where you are now, doing all those like trainings and things like that. I guess you can see personal development that way. Of okay, I've worked on this side, now let's reinforce this side, now let's do this one now, and let's keep going and going and going. So yeah, you could say that it is a it's another way to look at it, because it's not going to be the same, because the next time you go in, you're going in with a whole different lens, and we're going in a whole different premise. That's if you've done the work in between. And because a lot of people go to events and they are still the same as they were previously. So I guess as we are evolving and growing, being mindful of what do I want this time from this event? What are like what's and at the end, what's that one thing that I'm like taking off to the races? What are the things that are core things, and what am I using? And then if I'm to come back here again next time, what would be where would I want to be? Like where would be that marker that yes, I have been able to, even if you don't achieve it, like at least have something to say, this is where the marker for me for the next event that I use. And I've gone back to events and like not always hit the thing. And others have like, yes, made it work. And it's always great when that happens. Yeah. And for me, that's kind of like how I see how things are evolving, because I was thinking like, man, there was no sparkles and rainbows, but there was huge stuff. There was huge reminder, and there was huge like just remembering. And you like, yes, you're doing good. And also, oh, that's a different way to kind of like look at it, and then to think about it, and to make sure that um it's working, right? So yeah, to me that's the key thing of how that moving forward. And yeah, if you've been to events and you've gone and you've evolved over time, what has been that key thing for you? Of have you noticed a pattern? Have you noticed like some learning? Like what's the key thing for you? Let's carry on that conversations in the comment section. And yeah, if you're in that season of up leveling, next leveling, and yeah, just becoming and knowing how it affects us in our confidence, in our identity, our nervous system. Stay close, subscribe, like if this resonated, if you picked up anything. And yeah, we do this every single day. I am Nene. Your voice matters, and it's your time to use it. Bye for now.